Once upon a time, in a village nestled between rolling hills and a meandering river, there lived a poor farmer. Every year he planted rice in his field. The work was hard, but his family needed to eat and life was simple. But one year, a terrible flood hit their village. It washed away everything this poor farmer had worked so hard for. All his crops were destroyed, his home was in ruins, and even his hope for the future seemed lost. In the aftermath of the flood, most of his neighbors gave up. They packed their belongings and left the village, hoping for a better life elsewhere. But something inside this poor farmer kept him going. He looked at the muddy water receding from his fields and thought to himself, "I may have lost everything, but I still have my health and I have the skills to grow rice. I may be poor, but I'm not desperate." And with this newfound determination, he began to prepare the land for planting once again. As the other villagers watched him till the soil and scatter seeds, they shook their heads in disapproval. They had known him for years and knew how hard he had worked his entire life. They also knew that he had suffered more than anyone else in the village and understood why he had lost everything. They just couldn't comprehend why he would want to start over after all that he had endured. But the farmer didn't let their doubts get to him. He knew that starting over was the only way forward. So year after year he planted rice in his fields, hoping to one day harvest enough to sustain himself and his family. The first year after the flood he struggled. His back ached from carrying heavy loads of water to water his crops. His hands blistered from tilling the dry soil, and every night he worried about whether or not he'd made the right decision. But as the weeks passed and the rice grew taller, a small smile returned to his face. He had made it through the hardest part. Now all he had to do was wait for the harvest. When the rice was finally ready to be harvested, the farmer's joy knew no bounds. He had done it. He had survived another year. But as he gathered the rice stalks, his heart sank. The flood had taken everything from him, and now his crops were failing too. The stalks were thin and brittle, and when he threshed them, only a handful of rice grains fell out. It was barely enough to sustain him for a few months. Disappointment washed over him, but he refused to give up. He knew that with hard work and patience, he would succeed. The next year, the rains came late, and the fields were parched. The sun beat down mercilessly, and every day the farmer woke up before sunrise to water his crops. The other villagers watched him and shook their heads in sympathy. They had lost everything in the flood, and now it seemed as though nature itself was conspiring against him. But the farmer kept working. He knew that giving up was not an option. Finally, the rains came and brought life back to the fields. The rice grew tall and strong, and the farmer's heart soared. This year, he thought, would be different. He would finally have enough rice to feed himself and his family, and maybe even sell some at the market. But as the day of the harvest approached, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and soon the sky was roaring with thunder. The rains came, yes, but they came with a vengeance. The wind howled, the trees swayed, and the river overflowed its banks. In a matter of hours, the fields were under water. Again, the farmer stood watching the water rise, and despair threatened to engulf him. Just when he thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. For 3 years in a row, the weather had conspired against him, destroying everything he had worked so hard for. But the farmer was not a man to be defeated. He knew that giving up was not an option. So once again, he started over. Year after year, he planted rice in his fields, learning and adapting to the challenges that each season threw at him. He learned to plant different varieties of rice that could withstand floods or droughts. He learned to use the natural contours of the land to his advantage, and he learned to work with the seasons rather than against them. Most importantly, he never gave up. Slowly but surely, things began to change. The harvests were still small, but they were enough to sustain him and his family. And as the years passed, the harvests grew larger. Finally, after more than a decade, the farmer's hard work paid off. He had planted and harvested the same field for more than 10 years, and now it was bearing double the amount of rice it had in the beginning. Looking out over his field of waving rice stalks, the farmer felt a sense of pride and satisfaction that he had never felt before. He had done it. He had succeeded. News of the farmer's success spread quickly, and soon people from all over the region were coming to see him. They couldn't believe that after all the hardships he had endured, he had finally succeeded. "You must be the luckiest farmer in the world," they said to him. "How else can you explain it?" The farmer smiled and replied, "Luck has nothing to do with it. I just never gave up." And that's exactly what had happened. The farmer had been patient, persistent, and determined. He had learned from his mistakes and adapted to the changing conditions. And most importantly, he had never given up. Even when the odds were stacked against him, he had kept going. And in the end, his hard work had paid off. The farmer's story is a powerful reminder that success often takes time. It rarely happens overnight. There are countless examples of people who have faced seemingly insurmountable obstacles and emerged victorious. The key to their success was patience. They were willing to wait for the right moment to take action, to learn from their mistakes, and to adapt to the changing circumstances. There are many lessons we can learn from the story of the wise farmer. First and foremost, it teaches us the importance of patience. Success doesn't come overnight. It takes time and effort to achieve. The farmer didn't become successful because he was lucky. He became successful because he was patient and persistent. He never gave up even when things were tough. He kept going, and eventually he succeeded. Another lesson this story teaches us is that we should never give up. No matter how bad things may seem, there is always hope. The farmer never lost hope, even when he had lost everything. He believed that he could make a better life for himself and his family, and he never stopped trying. It also teaches us the importance of learning and adapting. The farmer didn't do the same thing every year and expect a different result. He learned from his mistakes and adapted to the changing conditions. He learned to plant different varieties of rice and to work with the seasons instead of against them. And it was this flexibility that allowed him to succeed. The story also highlights the importance of perseverance. The farmer faced many challenges over the years, but he never gave up. He kept going even when things were difficult, and his perseverance paid off in the end. And finally, this story teaches us the importance of hard work. Success doesn't come easy. It takes hard work and dedication to achieve. The farmer worked tirelessly to make his farm successful. He planted and harvested year after year, and his hard work eventually paid off. In conclusion, the story of the wise farmer is a powerful reminder that success often takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. The farmer didn't become successful because he was lucky. He became successful because he was patient, persistent, never gave up, learned and adapted, persevered, and worked hard. The story is an encouragement to all of us who are facing tough times in our own lives. It reminds us that no matter how bad things may seem, there is always hope. We should never give up. If we learn from our mistakes, adapt to the changing circumstances, persevere through the tough times, and work hard towards our goals, we too can succeed. The farmer's story is a testament to the power of patience. With patience, we can weather the storms of life and come out stronger on the other side.